important thing to learn in school is actually how to listen. Good listeners typically have more influence and stronger relationships with team members at work. They're more likely to be hired and promoted. And of course, listening skills are a key to good service. Everybody can think about the time they ordered food or a drink and somebody didn't get it right. Um, Good listeners are seen as both appealing and trustworthy. This goes for work, this goes for home. If your spouse or your child or your brother is a good listener, you know, that's something that makes them appeal to you. And of course, the converse is true. Um, if you think about personal relationships, listening topped the family social list of the importance of various communication skills. So, listening is very, very important. To illustrate that, you can see the last thing says bad listeners don't make baskets. So, for the example, and once again, I was coaching third graders in basketball, and I had a kid who would run and be way ahead of everybody else all the time. He wasn't that great of a basketball player, but he was pretty fast. And what I told him is to run to the block, and the block is the big red block by the basket, because if you run to the block, you're at the right angle, and to turn himself sideways so he could catch it and in one movement shoot it off the backboard and score. And of course, at third grade basketball, everybody loves to see their kids score. But the problem with this little individual was, while he was fast, he was not a good listener. And so he wouldn't run to the block, so he'd be at a bad angle, so even if he caught it and had a chance to shoot, he'd miss. Or he wouldn't be turned sideways, he'd be turned backwards. So by the time he caught it, reoriented himself, the other team would turn around and he would not score. So his listening skills were better. He would have had a lot more success scoring baskets in third grade basketball. There are some misconceptions about listening. Listening and hearing are not the same thing. You must pay attention, you must understand, and you should respond. Response does a couple of things. It clarifies the speaker's message, and it shows that you care about what was said. If you're a teacher, that's one reason why I'll ask questions in class about the lecture as you go, because maybe people aren't paying attention, or maybe they just didn't understand. And if you ask them a question, you'll get a response and you can clarify the message. The final step to good listening is remembering. Research reveals people remember about half of what they hear immediately after hearing it. And it says, you wonder why I repeat myself so much. If I'm in my face-to-face classes, for example, I will say over and over again what the instructions are and how to do things, because I understand that people don't listen or don't listen well. And it's important to understand that if you are the boss, if you're talking to your children, if you're coaching, if you're teaching, etc. And it's also important to remember to try to be a good listener. Listening is not a natural process. Everybody does it, but few people do it well. And once again, all listeners do not receive the same message. You can say the same thing to 10 third graders playing basketball, and all 10 of them don't do the same thing. And there are a lot of reasons why people don't hear what was said or distort the message the speaker is trying to convey. It might mean they're a poor listener. It might mean they have a hearing problem. It may mean that they have preconceived notions about what the speaker is going to say, and so they just put their own spin on it, and that's not what the person said. It's just important to remember there are a lot of reasons why someone may not get the message. If you think about overcoming challenges to effective listening, mindful listening requires effort. From time to time, I have to take courses relative to being a teacher, and I find personally that I can pay attention about 75% of the time. I'm working on that. But it's important to understand that, be aware that you aren't always listening and that you have to work at it. It's hard work. Practice makes perfect, or at least it'll make a lot better. And frankly speaking, thinking about listening and listening better is indicative of a mature and unselfish mind. In other words, you care what the other person's saying, and you understand that it's important to try to listen, to be respectful to someone else. It also, in many instances, is good for your own selfish interest. Scoring baskets, for example. There are a lot of faulty listening behaviors, of course. Pseudo-listening, people bob their head and occasionally give general answers, but really aren't listening. Selective listening, this is a very common one if you're teaching. I only care about what is important to me. Of course, oftentimes the person that's not listening very well doesn't know what will be important to them, and so this is not very effective. Defensive listening, everything's a personal attack. If someone thinks someone does not like them, it's very difficult to listen. Ambushing, I want to pretend I'm a cross-examining attorney. So basically what that means is I'm not really listening. I'm just waiting for you to say something that I can jump on. Insulated listeners, they don't hear any subject they don't want to deal with. Not to throw my mother-in-law under the bus, but she's guilty of this often. And then, of course, there's stage hogging. All topics of conversation are about me. Oprah Winfrey does this all the time. And a lot of people do. And so what they're basically doing is they're not really listening. They're just waiting for their opportunity to speak. There are a lot of reasons that there's poor listening. Sometimes it's message overload. If you teach and you try to teach too many things at one time, a lot of times it's just too much and the students will shut down, for example. There's rapid thought. If you think about when somebody's speaking, I'm talking right now, if you're listening, there's lots of mental spare time to deal with. I can't talk as fast as you can listen, and so there's other thoughts going through your head. There's psychological noise, could be personal concerns. If you're having a bad day, you don't feel well, you're worried about another test, you're getting a divorce, all those things can make you a poor listener. There's physical noise. There, as I said before, faulty assumptions. I think the speaker's going to say this, but really they're saying something else. Talking has more apparent advantages. I can control the situation. One reason why people want to talk rather than listen is so they can be the boss. And then, of course, there's media and technology. People have short little attention spans, and attention spans are probably getting worse, to be completely frank. And so it takes a lot of effort to be a good listener. There are many different types of listening. Task-oriented, you look for key ideas, you ask questions, you paraphrase. You need the information to get something done. Someone's asking me about an assignment. It's relational, connects emotionally with someone else. This takes time. You have to listen for unexpressed thoughts and feelings. If you're talking to your kid about why they didn't do well on the test, maybe there are reasons that you should listen to and not just be, not just trying to be expedient and say, hey, listen, study harder. Analytical, the goal is to understand the message. You're listening for the message before evaluation. You want to separate the message from the speaker and search for value. And then, of course, there's critical. It goes beyond analysis and you try to assess quality. You want to examine the speaker's evidence and reasoning, examine their credibility, look out for emotional appeals. And you might think of critical listening if you're listening to a couple of politicians talk and you want to know who to vote for. Of course, you're going to, hopefully anyway, listen very carefully about their evidence and reasoning and then look for emotional appeals and see exactly what they are saying. Listening and social support, there are types of supportive responses. So to be a good listener, it's important, as I said before, to respond. There are a lot of ways to do this. One is advising. You can help by offering a solution, which sometimes is a good idea. Analyzing, you can help by interpreting the speaker's message. This often, leads to questioning. It's a means to understand others better. So they say something. So what I hear you saying is a good way to respond to them. Comforting is important. I'm here if you need me. And then prompting, you can use silence and brief encouragement to draw others out. So a good way to be a listener is to maybe not say very much. And that seems obvious, but it isn't to a lot of people. So a lot of times it's just, refraining from speaking, listening, maybe giving brief encouragement, and to help other people express themselves. And then finally, you might want to talk about reflecting. And that's maybe the most important one, and that's paraphrasing to understand others. And it's also, when you paraphrase, you can help them understand themselves.